She screamed loudly, help me, somebody help." But the shout landed on closed ears. They thought they burnt her to serve their dead king in the afterlife. Instead, she became their greatest nightmare. They said it was tradition. In Arikoyi village, when a king died, strangers were seized, unlucky travelers, wanderers with no family to protect them. These strangers were taken, tied, and burnt alive with the king. For it was believed the king would need servants in the afterlife. And so, for centuries, strangers vanished above the dark clouds of Arikoyi, their cries swallowed by the chants of the happy villagers. On the night of the last king's burial, the villagers gathered, their drums heavy with an ancient rhythm. They danced, they chanted, they clapped, as they always did. But what none of them knew was that on that night, their ritual would open the gates of something far darker. For the stranger they burnt that night did not go quietly. Her name was Anwuli. She was young, barely in her 20s. Her skin the shade of earth after rain. Her eyes holding a softness that told of love waiting on the other side of her journey. She had boarded a bus that morning with laughter on her lips, carrying only a small bag of clothes and a pendant she had woven from cowries and red beads. It was meant for her fiancé, a gift of love, a token of promise. The bus never reached its destination. On a winding road carved through the forest, the driver lost control. The bus rolled like a wounded beast, metal shrieking against stone, bodies colliding, screams rising into the heavy sky. When the dust settled, silence reigned. The passengers lay broken, their souls released. Oh, except Anwuli. Her head spun, her body bruised, but breath still filled her lungs. She staggered to her feet, the smell of blood thick in the air, the cries of insects filling the void. Stumbling into the trees, she walked, not knowing where she was, not knowing she was stepping into the land of Arikoyi. The villagers spotted her just as the drums of the burial began. A stranger, walking alone, hair loose, shirt stained, their eyes sharpened. The king had died that morning. His grave yawned open, awaiting the smell of a burnt human as a companion. She begged them when they seized her. Her voice cracked like dry wood. She told them she had a man waiting, that she was no slave, that she was innocent. But tradition was stronger than compassion. They tied her wrists, bound her ankles, and dragged her across the ground. She was set on fire. The fire clung to her skin. Her screams carried into the night. Anwuli's screams filled the night, piercing and raw. A sound that seemed to split the heavens. But Anwuli's soul did not rest. The first sign came 3 nights later. A woman, pounding yam by the light of the moon, froze when she heard a whisper. It was soft, drawn out, like a voice carried on the wind. "You killed me." She turned, pestle trembling in her hands. There was nothing. But that night, she did not wake. Her body was found stiff, her eyes shut, her mouth open. Others followed, ranging from young women, children, and even twins. At first, it was only whispers, faint, almost tender. "You killed me." But those who heard those words never lived to see the sun. The villagers began to murmur. By day, Anwuli appeared, not as the broken stranger they burnt and buried, but more radiant than any woman the village had seen. Her skin glowed as if the sun itself caressed her. Her eyes were dark pools, her smile a mystery. She walked through the marketplace, her wrapper tied tight, beads clinking softly with every step. Men stared, women whispered. Her beauty unsettled them, yet drew them closer. The elders said nothing. They watched, their lips pressed tight, their hearts afraid to admit the truth. But the men could not resist. Dele, the wealthy yam farmer, was the first to taste the wrath of a merciless woman. He saw her at the stream one morning. The mist clung low over the water, her figure bending gracefully as she filled her calabash. Her wrapper, damp from the river, clung to her curves. She straightened slowly, her eyes catching his for a moment. Then she swayed as she walked, her butt shaking vigorously, like a tsunami, hips rolling, and beads bouncing. She knew he watched. She wanted him to. That night, Dele tossed on his mat. He dreamed of her. While deep in his sleep, she appeared before him, her hands stretched towards his sleeping body. A shadow poured into his body, wrapping around his chest, squeezing the life from him. By dawn, his neighbors found him lifeless. The whispers spread. The villagers began to shiver in fear. Anwuli had not been laid to rest. She had been bound in anger, and now she was hunting them. The dead always have ways of carving their names into the memory of the living, and Anwuli began to carve hers in blood. And yet, in the light of day, when Anwuli walked the dusty paths of the village, men still watched her. She was death, but she was also desire. Her presence was a strange contradiction. She no longer wore the clothes from her journey. Now, her cloth shimmered, too fine for any market woman to sell. Emeka was not from Arikoyi. He was a traveler, a businessman, smooth of tongue, a man who prided himself on conquest. When he arrived, the village women instantly fell in love with his goods and not him. They loved him because his meat was the cheapest in the market. He also sometimes sold his meat on credit, which also made him popular. One fateful morning, he was in his meat shade, advertising his product and making sure even those who didn't have money to buy borrowed just to get his meat on discount. As he went about advertising his product, she emerged, her beauty never fading. Her smile competed with the sun, and her gaze fixed on Emeka. Emeka was no longer thinking straight. The only thing on his mind was on how to approach her. He sought her out, leaving behind his meat for thieves and flies to parade on. He followed her, whispering praises, words dripping like honey. She ignored him, but he was persistent. For days, he chased her shadow, until one night, she led him to the tree at the edge of the village. There, she turned, her eyes turning red faintly. Her smile disappeared. He couldn't run. He was conscious of what was happening, but Anwuli already took over his mind. The next morning, his body, which was now puffed like puff-puff, was found on the walkway, very close to a tree. Anwuli was very strategic. She knew where the men gathered. She knew they would always talk about her, and so she always never fails to show up when she's the topic of discussion. This sudden appearance was no coincidence. They were all planned by a woman who only wants full revenge on the villagers that cut her life short. She shows up, takes over the minds of men showing lust and interest, manipulates them, and sniffs out the life out of them. But the worst was yet to come for the people of Arikoyi. Maybe not for now. It was in this season of dread that Obi stepped quietly into the tale. Obi was only 19, very handsome, with a shoulder that has carried so much emotional pain over the years. His feet calloused from chasing rodents through the bush. He was an orphan, the son of parents who had died not by the will of spirits, but by the cruelty of man. Years ago, their closest friend, a childless man consumed by envy, had poisoned their food. The villagers remembered that day well. The sudden cries, the vomiting, the lifeless bodies carried into the square. The boy who lived was left with no family, no inheritance, no protection, but the shadow of his parents' love. The first time Anwuli crossed his path, it was by accident. He had gone to the forest to check his traps, hoping to find a rabbit or bush rat. Slowly, he lifted his head, and there she was, Anwuli, the stranger, the most feared. Obi's breath caught. His legs wanted to run, but something deeper, something beyond fear, held him still. And in that frozen moment, they appeared, his parents, or what seemed to be them. Their figures shimmered faintly beside him, transparent, glowing softly in the golden dusk. They stood protectively beside him. Anwuli paused. For the first time, Obi trembled long after she was gone. His breath came ragged, his chest tight. The day after his first strange encounter with Anwuli, Obi walked the narrow paths of Arikoyi, carrying the small bow his father once carved for him. That night, drawn by something stronger than fear, Obi returned to his farmland. She was there again. Anwuli, you came back, she said, her voice low, carrying the ache of centuries. Obi nodded, his breath steady. Her lips curved into something between a smile and sorrow. And you are not afraid? Why should I fear you? He asked, his eyes fixed on her. I see a beautiful woman, once peaceful, but now holds anger and vengeance. Her voice wavered. No one has spoken to me like that. Not since. She looked away, words swallowed by memory. In the days that followed, their bond deepened like roots reaching for water. One night, Anwuli spoke of herself. Not all, just fragments. Broken pieces of a life once filled with love. I was not meant to be here. My road was not meant to end in Arikoyi, she continued. I was to meet the man who waited for me. His name is Femi. I had made him a gift with my own hands, a pendant. I wanted to place it around his neck myself, to tell him I would walk beside him for the rest of our days. She drew closer, her voice now pleading. Obi, will you carry a message for me? He stared at her, his heart pounding. What message? She lifted her hand, mist and light swelling together until a faint glow appeared. From it, a shape emerged, a pendant. I made this for him. Tell him that Anwuli never betrayed her promise. Will you do this for me? Anwuli asked. Obi nodded. Her eyes softened with gratitude. But Anwuli wasn't done yet. She needed to make her last statement. And this time, it was the dead king's son, Adigan, the prince, son of the dead king, heir to the throne. His pride was his armor. He had watched Anwuli from afar, his eyes full of hunger. One evening, he decided to take a walk across the village. There, he saw the one his heart longed for. He walked faster, in a bid to catch up with his nemesis. He tried starting up a conversation, but she totally ignored him. But pride is death. He followed her, his chest filled with pride and determination. She cast a spell on him and led him deep into the treacherous part of the river. Hours passed. The moon climbed. Then, at dawn, a scream so raw, so full of pain, it silenced even the frogs, was heard from a maiden who went to fetch water from the river that morning. His body now bloated, his belly once filled with pride, now replaced with water. And the village knew true fear. The death of the prince shattered Arikoyi. Until then, the villagers had convinced themselves that Anwuli's vengeance was for the reckless, for the boastful, for the lustful men who had courted her shadow. But Adigan's death broke that fragile comfort. The entire village gathered at the square. The chief priest rose to speak, his voice heavy with the weight of centuries. We have angered the gods. The king is buried, but his spirit does not rest. The stranger we gave him has cursed us, for her cries were not silenced. That night, the village was a tomb of silence. The men sat with weapons. Those without cutlass held rakes and wood, and those without any weapon held onto their life, eyes darting toward every shadow. And yet, Anwuli walked as though the fear was her crown. The day Obi decided to leave Arikoyi, the sky itself seemed to sense it. The road ahead was long, a path carved by feet and wheels before him, but it felt endless. Sometimes Anwuli appeared beside him. When he reached the town, it struck him like another world. Here, the air was lighter. Voices carried freely. Laughter of children floated through the dust. He asked quietly for Femi. They directed Obi to a small compound. There, sitting beneath a tree, was Femi. His eyes looked as though they had not closed in true sleep for many months. Obi approached slowly. Are you Femi? The man turned his head as though it weighed a stone. His gaze, when it met Obi's, was hollow. I was. He reached into his bag and drew out the pendant. He held it forward with both hands. Anwuli sent me. She begged me to give you this, to tell you she never betrayed her promise, that even in death, she thought of you. The moment the pendant touched Femi's palm, his cry filled the compound. He clutched to his chest, his tears cutting past into the dust. And in that moment, Anwuli appeared behind Obi, unseen by the townsfolk. She gazed at Femi, at the man who had carried her and his grief for 5 long months, and whispered, Now you know. Now I am free. Her eyes lingered on Obi. Thank you, Obi. The wind rose suddenly, swirling around her. It lifted the last strands of vengeance from her form, carrying them into the sky. Back in Arikoyi, the villagers noticed. 4 moons passed without a hunting. Fear gave way to uneasy relief. And so, the elders called a gathering beneath the old Iroko tree. Their voices rose in heated debate. At last, the oldest among them, bent with age and scarred by time, raised his hand. His voice was rough but steady. If the royal line so dearly desires slaves in the beyond, let them give of themselves. Let the king's firstborn be buried with him. Let no innocent stranger suffer again. A hush fell. The younger elders shifted uncomfortably, but none dared challenge him. One by one, they nodded. The decree was made. The ritual was ended. Obi returned to Arikoyi quietly. The villagers did not welcome him, but they did not curse him either. But Obi himself sought no recognition. Sometimes at night, when the stars burned brightest, he thought he saw Anwuli's smile hidden among them. In those moments, the orphan boy who had once been cursed felt, at last, that he had walked with someone who truly saw him.